We told you last night that an 11-year-old boy was pushed in front of a subway train. He's in the hospital in serious condition tonight, but he is getting a little better. And there is some question tonight whether or not he really was pushed. The police think that he could have just been fooling around with some of his friends and fell onto the tracks. There is no doubt, though, about what happened in Jackson Heights this morning. Police are positive a man there was pushed in front of a subway train. He was killed, and the police say they have the man who did it.
They had to sense something was wrong. Commuters on the platform at 74th Street and Broadway in Jackson Heights would later tell police of how 18-year-old Anthony Graham reached up, unscrewed 2 light bulbs from the roof of the elevated platform, and then, according to police, he crushed them in his bare hands. Moments later, as a Manhattan-bound train pulled into the station, police say the same young man darted forward and pushed an unidentified man in front of that train. The man died instantly. What happened after that isn't exactly clear, but based on a description given by witnesses on the platform, 3 transit cops picked up Anthony Graham walking calmly 6 blocks away.
So the officer grabbed us, jumped in our car, and then the 3 of us went after him.
You just observed him on the street, or was he running?
He was just walking down the street like, nothing happened.
How many times have we seen that? Hit 1. If you recall seeing that a lot in my videos. The guy has just done the most heinous crime. I mean, left somebody dead. And he's just moseying along like nothing happened. He's just walking down the street like nothing happened. Thank God for these cameras. They didn't have cameras in 1980. So, 1980... they could be like, well, this is race. They just picked up a random. Anytime something happened, because this is what they used to do. Anytime something happened, they just pick up a random person for no reason. Yeah, right.
So the officer grabbed us, jumped in our car, and then the 3 of us went after him.
You just observed him on the street, or was he running?
He was just walking down the street like, nothing happened.
Detectives who questioned Graham would later describe his veneer as calm, easygoing, seemingly unconcerned that he was being arrested for murder.
He seemed calm and not even tripping that he was being arrested for murder. If the cops ran up on you and you didn't do nothing and were like, yo, we're arresting you for murder, what you talking about? What? Man, that's crazy, man. No, make it. What? No, I want a lawyer right now. What the heck? Anthony was just like, oh, for real? Oh, all right. Think about that. Y'all got to be able to put 1 and 1 together, man. Cops just run up on you and say you kills a, oh, for real? All right. I guess we're going to ride into the station. Oh, well.
Detectives who questioned Graham would later describe his veneer as calm, easygoing, seemingly unconcerned that he was being arrested for murder. Later, while a transit police official distracted reporters, other cops snuck Graham out a back door to avoid photographers. Sources told us later they didn't want witnesses from other cases seeing Graham's picture in the paper before they could attend a lineup.
So you hear that? Even in 1980, they was protecting the Sun Man, sneaking him out the back. So, people from other cases wouldn't see him. Say, oh, that's the guy that mugged me. Oh, that's the guy that robbed me. They wanted it to be good. They wanted if you saw him, you was going to do it in a lineup. And you wouldn't have a chance to be polluted or prejudiced against this brother. Even in 1980, they was doing everything they could to protect the Sun Man. And that's part of the lie. Like, it was so bad back. Yeah, it was bad back in the day. 1980, man, the Sun Man ain't had no problems, man. Sun Man ain't had no problems in 1980, man. It's all good. Only problem was they pushing people in front of trains. That's the only problem he had.
Distracted reporters, other cops snuck Graham out a back door to avoid photographers. Sources told us later they didn't want witnesses from other cases seeing Graham's picture in the paper before they could attend a lineup. The suspect was taken here to the 112th precinct where he'll be processed for night court. In the meantime, detectives of the Queens Task Force were organizing an investigation to do background checks. They're going to be checking to see if Mr. Graham might be connected with some open cases they're dealing with, including the case of the Cleaver man. That's the gentleman who struck twice on the subways last week with a meat cleaver, injuring 4 people.
They've been calling us gentlemen for years, too. They've been calling son criminals gentlemen for years. Yeah, I notice I make a note to point it out now, but they've been doing that since the 80s. Gentlemen who just hacked a bunch of people to death on the train. Gentlemen. But anyway, why am I showing you this? I'm showing you this because this was New York in 1980 and all throughout the 80s and the early 90s. Very violent, dangerous place because of, you know who. And, you know, also you had the mafia, but you know, Giuliani cleaned up the mafia and cleaned up the city. And crime was going down every year from the late 90s up until a few years ago. Now New York is headed back in the other direction. And the same things that were happening then are starting to happen now a lot. And something is going to have to be done. Something is going to have to be done. Because it was one thing to have this going on back in those days where, you know, you just had ABC, NBC, and CBS, and then you had your local paper. So you didn't really hear what was going on in New York unless it was a big expose, 60 Minutes or something like that. Or Nightline to do a special on crime in New York every year or so. And if you missed it, you missed it. If you was doing something else when it came on, it was done. Maybe magazines like, you know, Time or, you know, Newsweek would do an expose on it or whatnot, blah, blah, blah. But now, if it gets like it was back in those days, when New York had 2,000 murders a year. Yes, 2,000 plus murders a year. And all types of people getting pushed on the train all the time, and muggings and robbings and slashings, and people holding up the whole train car. They would come on the train car and hold up the whole car and walk around with a bag and take everybody's wallet and go to the next car. It can't get like that again because we have, they can't let it get like that, those politicians up there, because we have, everybody has a camera in their pocket and can instantly disseminate what's on their camera to the whole world with one click.
I hate to tell you, but it has happened again. Another unprovoked subway shove. This time, a man was pushed off a subway platform. As you can imagine, these attacks are leaving New Yorkers on edge. CBS 2's Thalia Perez has more.
Police are searching for the suspect they say shoved a 62-year-old man onto the tracks around 11:30 a.m. Fortunately, the incoming train was able to stop in time as it pulled into the Fulton Street station. The victim only suffered minor injuries. But the victim of a previous attack on January 15th wasn't so lucky. Police say Michelle Go was waiting for a train on the platform in Times Square when she was shoved in front of an oncoming train. Simon Marshall, described by police as a homeless ex-con, is facing second-degree murder charges. There have been at least 3 unprovoked attacks so far this year involving someone that was pushed onto the tracks. The surge in subway violence has advocates up in arms.
Look, man, it's not as bad as 1980. I'm not saying that at all. It's not as bad as 1980. I think New York had 450 murders last year, something like that. Nowhere near the 2,400 they would have every year in back in the day, but it had like 300 a few years ago. It's moving towards in the wrong direction. And it can happen quick. Like within 5 years, it could be back to where it was in the 80s. And I don't think you want to see that type of carnage, with just like on Twitter and like if we're going to see that, it's not just going to be like, man, don't go to New York, or if you go to New York, stay off the train, or like or you know what I'm saying, movies about New York, or you know, New York Undercover, all the shows about New York cops and whatnot. You know, you're going to see the actual events nowadays as it spirals back into the 1980s.
The surge in subway violence has advocates up in arms.
I blame our elected officials because there's a lot of back and forth debating, but no one wants to take responsibility.
In response, the MTA says these incidents are unacceptable and are working with government officials to deploy more officers. In Midtown, Thalia Perez, CBS 2 News.
Police have released new images of the man accused of pushing a 62-year-old man onto subway tracks at the Fulton Street station. The suspect can be seen coming off an escalator. Investigators say that he shoved the 62-year-old just as the train approached on Sunday morning. The victim managed to survive but suffered cuts to his leg and bruising.
Listen, man, you should read the comments on some of these posts. You should go to the New York news stations on Twitter and on YouTube and read the comment section. Everybody knows. Cat's out of the bag. Everybody's connected the dots. Everybody. I mean everybody. But publicly, they can't say anything. They can only say things in comment sections, and then they can't really say it on Twitter because you got to be super woke on Twitter. But in these comment sections, whoo, everybody knows. Everybody's drawing the connection. Every time the shooting, every time someone's getting slashed randomly by someone they've never met, every time someone's pushed on the tracks by someone they don't know, don't have a beef with, have never laid eyes on, there's always a unifying trait in all of the people who are doing this. Every time someone kills a fast food worker, carjacks somebody, knocks an old lady out for no reason, it's always, everybody knows.
Later, investigators say that he shoved the 62-year-old just as the train approached on Sunday morning. The victim managed to survive but suffered cuts to his leg and bruising.
6:17 and happening today, Manhattan Borough President Mark Levine and members of the New York City Council will call for barriers to be placed on subway platforms. They want the MTA to immediately begin a pilot program for barriers at stations that have been experiencing violent platform.
Okay, so they're talking about barriers. I told you they wasn't going to let this go back to the 1980s, where this happens like all the time, every other day and whatnot. But I don't know if this works. I think what will work better than barriers, because what we're going to see now is people being picked up and thrown over the barriers onto the tracks. I promise you. I promise you. I promise you. This is not like like I think, an opinion. I promise you, if you put barriers in front of the tracks, they'll just pick people up and push them over the barriers, or shove them over the barriers. I promise you. I promise you. So I think the best thing that they need to do the best course of action would be to just heavy police presence on the trains, in the train stations, and lock up criminals when they commit crimes, because all the guys who do this stuff are out on bond for violent crimes, on parole for violent crimes, or have been recently arrested for a violent crime and out on bond. All of these guys are menaces to society. These are not like normal people that do this stuff. And when I say normal, I'm not talking about crazy or mental health. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm just talking about these are bad dudes that do this stuff. So if you just stop letting them out of jail for the last thing they did, they won't be able to do the next thing, which is push somebody on the train. But I don't think barriers are going to work. I think they're just going to push people over the barriers. Unless you're going to make the barriers like 20 feet high or to the ceiling. But if you're just going to like put a rail there, like handrail high, that's not going to work. They're just going to push the people over those things.